The transport ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace and pressed her face against the small porthole to get her first glimpse of the Nexus Academy. The massive space station hung like a glittering jewel against the star-filled void, its crystalline spires reaching out in impossible geometric patterns that several known laws of physics. Ships from dozens of species moved in carefully orchestrated patterns around the station's docking bays, their exotic designs a testament to the galaxy's incredible diversity. "First time seeing the Academy?" asked the pilot, his four eyes blinking in sequence as he maneuvered the ship toward docking bay 7. His scaled hands moved across controls that looked more like musical instruments than navigation equipment. Nodded, not trusting her voice. She had dreamed of this moment for years, but now that it was happening, the weight of her deception felt heavier than the gravity generators beneath her feet. The identity chip in her pocket bore the name and listed her species as Terran Minor, a classification she had carefully crafted to hide her true origins. As far as anyone at the Academy knew, she was just another student from a backwater world, lucky enough to receive a scholarship. The truth was far more complicated. The docking process took 20 minutes, during which reviewed her carefully memorized backstory one more time. 442B, a small mining colony, parents who died in an industrial accident, raised by her grandfather, a former engineer, exceptional test scores that earned her a place at the galaxy's most prestigious educational institution. Every detail had been researched and could withstand casual scrutiny. What her false identity didn't mention was that she was human, not Terran Minor, not from some obscure colony world, but from Earth itself. The planet that the Galactic Council had declared too dangerous for contact after reviewing humanity's violent history. The species that was forbidden from joining galactic society until they could prove they had overcome their aggressive tendencies. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was probably the most dangerous being aboard the Academy, and no one suspected a thing. "Docking complete," announced the pilot. "Welcome to Nexus Academy, young scholar. May your studies bring honor to your world." Gathered her single bag and made her way to the airlock. The artificial gravity here was slightly lighter than what she was used to, a compromise between the needs of different species. She had trained for this, spending months in variable gravity chambers to perfect the slightly awkward gait that characterized low gravity. The docking bay was a marvel of engineering and diplomacy. The atmosphere was carefully maintained to support the widest possible range of species, with environmental suits available for those who needed them. Holographic signs displayed information in over 200 languages, and translation fields ensured that any spoken words were understood by all listeners. Enhanced hearing picked up fragments of conversation as she moved through the crowds. A group of crystalline students discussed quantum mechanics and harmonics that made her teeth ache. Two young hive minds debated philosophy while their constituent bodies moved in perfect synchronization. A lone void swimmer floated in a mobility tank, its bioluminescent organs pulsing in complex patterns that she recognized as mathematical equations. "Excuse me," said a voice behind her. "Are you from 442B?" Turned to see a tall, slender being with pale blue skin and large black eyes. The Academy's standard uniform hung elegantly on their frame, and a small badge identified them as a student orientation guide. "Yes, that's me," replied, keeping her accent neutral. "Excellent, I'm Venturi, third-year student in advanced xenobiology. I've been assigned to help you get settled in." His voice carried the musical quality common to their species, each word rising and falling in a pleasant cadence. "I understand you're here on a general studies scholarship." "That's right, I haven't declared a major yet." This was true, though had already decided she would focus on military strategy and defensive technologies. Knowledge that might one day help protect Earth from the very civilization she was infiltrating. They walked together through the Academy's main corridors and had to fight to keep her expression neutral. The architecture was stunning, with soaring ceilings that seemed to extend into infinity and walls that shifted color and texture based on the ambient lighting. But more impressive than the aesthetics was the underlying technology. Her enhanced senses detected power conduits that could supply a small planet, computational networks that processed information faster than Earth's most advanced quantum computers, and defensive systems that made her military training centers look like children's playgrounds. "The Academy was founded over 800 years ago," explained as they walked, "by the Treaty of Minds. It was designed to be neutral ground where all species could send their young minds to learn together. The theory is that education is the foundation of peace. Has it worked? Asked. Well, there hasn't been a major galactic war since the Academy's founding, so the founders would say yes, though there have been plenty of smaller conflicts. Paused at an observation deck that looked out over one of the Academy's central plazas. The key is that most political and military leaders have friends here, people they studied with from other species. It's hard to order the destruction of a world when you know people who live there. Nodded thoughtfully while her mind calculated the strategic implications. The Academy wasn't just an educational institution. It was a massive diplomatic initiative designed to create personal bonds between future leaders. It was brilliant, actually, and it explained why Earth had been excluded. Humanity's reputation for violence preceded them. Here's your dormitory assignment, said, handing her a small crystal chip. You'll be in Residential Sector C, Room 2847. The Academy uses a mixed-species housing policy, so you'll have 3 roommates from different worlds. Stomach tightened. Living in close quarters with alien species would make maintaining her disguise much more challenging. What species? Let's see, consulted their data pad. A named Whisper of Wind Through Leaves, a mechanist called Unit 7, and a psionic named 7743, quite a diverse group. Perfect thought. A species that communicated primarily through scent markers, a cybernetic being that processed information at superhuman speeds, and a telepath. Any one of them could expose her true nature within hours. They continued the tour, visiting the main lecture halls, the library complex that contained the accumulated knowledge of dozens of civilizations, and the recreational facilities that included everything from zero-gravity sports courts to meditation pools filled with liquid starlight. Everywhere they went, potential security weaknesses, escape routes, and strategic resources. One thing to remember, said as they approached the dormitory sector, is that the Academy has very strict rules about conflict between students. Physical violence results in immediate expulsion, no exceptions. The peace accords that govern this place are taken very seriously. Almost laughed at the irony. Violence was humanity's supposed weakness, the reason they were banned from galactic society. Yet here, in the galaxy's most important institution, violence was absolutely forbidden. It was as if the other species recognized that intellectual competition could become just as destructive as physical warfare. Room 2847 was larger than she had expected, with 4 distinct living areas arranged around a central common space. Each area was designed to accommodate different species' needs, with adjustable atmosphere, gravity, and lighting. The walls displayed a rotating selection of artwork from across the galaxy, and the furniture could reconfigure itself to match any known body plan. Called a melodious voice as she entered. A figure emerged from one of the side rooms, moving with the fluid grace characteristic of aquatic species. This had to be Whisper of Wind Through Leaves, though their translator was apparently taking some liberties with their actual name. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, with translucent skin that showed the flow of internal fluids in mesmerizing patterns. Welcome to our humble dwelling space. Thank you, replied, setting down her bag. I'm looking forward to getting to know everyone. Unit 7 is currently in maintenance cycle, Whisper explained, their internal patterns shifting to what hoped indicated friendliness. And 7743 is attending advanced meditation classes, but they will both be eager to meet you when they return. Spent the next hour settling into her assigned area, unpacking the carefully selected belongings that supported her cover identity. A few books from her supposed home world, photos of landscapes that had never existed, and personal items that had been aged and worn to suggest a lifetime of use. Every object had a story, and she knew each one by heart. As evening approached, her other roommates returned. Unit 7 turned out to be a fascinating fusion of organic and mechanical components, their consciousness distributed across both biological neurons and quantum processors. They greeted with a series of pleasant electronic tones before switching to spoken language. It is a pleasure to meet you. I have analyzed the academic records from your home world and found them quite impressive for such a limited educational infrastructure. Thank you, said, hopping her nervousness didn't show. I've always believed that limitations force us to be more creative. 7743 arrived shortly after, their appearance almost disappointingly normal after the exotic nature of her other roommates. They looked vaguely humanoid, though their skin had a subtle phosphorescent quality and their eyes were completely black. As a psionic, they could read surface thoughts and emotions, which made them the greatest immediate threat to her secret. "Welcome," said, and their voice carried an odd echo, as if multiple people were speaking in perfect unison. "Your mind feels guarded. This is not uncommon among new students. The academy can be overwhelming." Forced herself to relax, drawing on years of mental conditioning. "Everything here is so different from home. I'm still adjusting." "Of course, if you need any assistance with the transition, please do not hesitate to ask. We all went through the same adjustment period." The four of them shared dinner in the common area, a meal that had been carefully designed to provide nutrition for all their diverse metabolisms. The conversation flowed naturally, covering topics from academic expectations to speculation about their professors. Found herself genuinely enjoying the company, which was not something she had anticipated. "What field of study interests you most?" Whisper asked, their internal patterns shifting to deeper blues and purples. "I'm considering several options," replied carefully. "Strategic studies, maybe some engineering courses. I want to understand how different civilizations solve complex problems." "Ah, a future diplomat perhaps," Unit 7 suggested, their optical sensors focusing on her with obvious interest. "The galaxy always needs individuals who can bridge the gaps between cultures." If only they knew, thought. Her mission was exactly that, though not in the way they imagined. She was here to learn everything she could about galactic civilization, to understand its strengths and weaknesses, and to determine whether Earth could ever truly join this community or if humanity would always remain outsiders. "Maybe," she said aloud, "I think I need to learn more about the galaxy before I can decide how to contribute to it." The next morning brought her first classes, and threw herself into them with genuine enthusiasm. Comparative civilization studies proved to be exactly what she needed, offering detailed analyses of how different species had evolved their societies, technologies, and philosophies. The professor, an ancient being whose species name translated roughly as memory keeper, had personally witnessed the rise and fall of several galactic empires. "Today we will examine the concept of aggressive expansion," the professor announced, their crystalline body chiming softly as they moved. "Throughout galactic history, most species have gone through what we term the conquest phase, where they attempt to spread their influence through force." Sat up, knowing this topic would be crucial to understanding humanity's reputation. The Empire, for example, conquered over 40 worlds before their society evolved beyond the need for territorial expansion. The Void Swimmers went through a brief but intense period of absorption, incorporating other species into their collective consciousness. Even the Peaceful once attempted to improve other worlds by forcibly modifying their ecosystems. The professor's gaze seemed to linger on each student in turn. "The key factor in determining a species' readiness for galactic citizenship is whether they have successfully overcome these aggressive impulses. Some species require centuries to make this transition. Others never do." A student near the back raised their hand. "Professor, what about species that are still in their conquest phase? How does the Council handle them?" "Quarantine protocols," the professor replied matter-of-factly. "Complete isolation until they either evolve beyond their aggressive nature or destroy themselves. The galaxy cannot risk contamination by uncontrolled aggressive behavior." Felt a chill run down her spine. This was the official policy toward Earth and humanity: complete isolation. No contact, no trade, no chance to prove that they could change. Humanity was trapped in a cage of its own violent history. But as she listened to the professor describe other species' transitions from aggression to civilization, she began to see patterns. Most species that successfully made the change had been guided by contact with more advanced civilizations. They had examples to follow, mentors to help them understand different ways of thinking. Humanity had been all of that. After class, she walked through the academy's gardens, trying to process what she had learned. The gardens were a masterpiece featuring plants from hundreds of worlds growing in carefully balanced ecosystems. She found a quiet spot beneath a tree whose leaves chimed like bells in the artificial breeze. A voice called. She looked up to see 7743 approaching, their dark eyes reflecting the garden's bioluminescent flowers. "You seemed troubled after class today." "Just thinking about what Professor Memory Keeper said," she replied, which was true enough. sat beside her, their presence oddly comforting. The topic of aggressive species troubles many students. We all wonder if our own civilizations truly have moved beyond such impulses, or if we've simply learned to hide them better. "What do you think?" asked. "I think," said slowly, "that the capacity for violence exists in all sentient beings. The question is whether we choose to use it constructively or destructively. A surgeon's blade cuts flesh, but to heal rather than harm." Stared at them, struck by the profound simplicity of the observation. "So you think the Council is wrong to quarantine aggressive species?" "I think the Council is afraid," said, their voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "They have created a peaceful civilization, but it is a fragile peace built on exclusion rather than inclusion. They fear that any contact with violence will shatter what they have built." "But doesn't that make their peace incomplete?" asked. "If it can't withstand contact with different viewpoints?" Smiled, the first truly human expression she had seen them make. "Now you're beginning to think like a true scholar. Question everything, even the fundamental assumptions of the society you're part of." As they sat together in the garden, realized that her mission might be more complex than she had originally thought. She had come here to spy on galactic civilization, to learn its weaknesses and assess its threats to Earth. But she was beginning to understand that the galaxy itself might need what humanity could offer, even if they didn't realize it yet. The next few weeks passed in a blur of classes, study sessions, and social activities. Excelled academically, her enhanced human intellect giving her advantages she was careful not to make too obvious. She joined study groups, participated in cultural exchange programs, and slowly built a network of friends and acquaintances across multiple species. But as time passed, she began to notice things that disturbed her. The Academy's curriculum was incredibly advanced in sciences, arts, and philosophy, but woefully inadequate in areas like crisis management, conflict resolution, and military strategy. When she tried to access materials on these subjects, she found them heavily restricted or completely absent. "Why doesn't the Academy teach military history?" she asked Unit 7 during one of their late-night study sessions. Unit 7's optical sensors dimmed slightly, which she had learned indicated discomfort. "Such subjects are considered unproductive. The Council believes that studying warfare only encourages its development." "But doesn't that leave students unprepared for the realities of the galaxy?" pressed. "Even if the major powers are peaceful, there must still be pirates, rebels, natural disasters that require coordinated responses." "The peacekeepers handle such matters," Whisper interjected, their patterns shifting to muted grays. "Students are not expected to concern themselves with such dark subjects." Filed this information away with growing concern. The galaxy's greatest educational institution was deliberately keeping its students ignorant of practical survival skills. They were creating a generation of brilliant scholars who would be helpless in any real crisis. It was during her second month at the Academy that she encountered her first real test. She was walking back from the library late one evening when she heard sounds of distress coming from one of the maintenance corridors. Against her better judgment, she followed the sounds and found 3 students surrounding a smaller figure. "Please," the smaller student was saying, "I haven't done anything wrong. I just want to go back to my room." "You don't belong here, freak," one of the aggressors said, recognized him as a student from one of the more militaristic species that had been admitted despite some reservations. "Your kind are barely above animals." The victim was a young gentle one, a species known for their extreme pacifism and fragile physiology. They stood barely 4 feet tall, with large eyes and delicate limbs that looked like they would break at the slightest touch. Felt anger surge through her, the carefully controlled human aggression that she had spent years learning to suppress. These bullies were picking on someone who literally couldn't fight back due to their species' genetic programming. "That's enough," she said, stepping into the corridor. Turned to look at her, his reptilian features twisting into a sneer. "Walk away, colony girl. This doesn't concern you." "I'm making it my concern," replied, moving to place herself between the bullies and their victim. "The Academy has rules about this kind of behavior." "The Academy has rules about violence," said, taking a step closer to her. "But we're not being violent, we're just having a conversation." Training kicked in, her enhanced reflexes automatically calculating attack angles and defensive positions. She could disable all 3 of them within seconds. but doing so would reveal abilities that no minor colony should possess. Instead, she activated the recording function on her personal communicator and held it up where they could see it. "Then you won't mind if I document this conversation for the Student Conduct Committee," she said calmly. The effect was immediate. All three bullies stepped back, their aggressive postures deflating. Being expelled from the academy would destroy their futures, and they knew it. "This isn't over," muttered as they retreated. "Yes, it is," called after them. "Because if I hear about you bothering anyone else, this recording goes straight to the administration." After they left, she knelt beside the gentle one, who was trembling with fear and stress. "Are you hurt?" she asked gently. "And no," they whispered. "Thank you for helping me. I don't understand why they hate us so much." "Some people need others to be beneath them to feel important," said, helping them to their feet. "It says more about them than it does about you." As she walked the gentle one back to their dormitory, reflected on what had just happened. She had been faced with a choice between maintaining her cover and protecting an innocent being. The fact that she hadn't hesitated to help revealed something about herself that her superiors on Earth might not approve of. She was becoming attached to this place and these people. The incident had consequences she hadn't anticipated. Word spread quickly through the Academy's student population that someone had finally stood up to the most notorious bully on campus. Suddenly, found herself something of a celebrity among the more vulnerable student populations. "You did the right thing," told her one evening as they studied together in their common room. "But you should be careful. Species values strength above all else. He will see your intervention as a challenge." "Let him," replied, then caught herself. That was too aggressive a response for someone from a peaceful mining colony. "I mean, I hope you'll just leave everyone alone from now on." His black eyes studied her with uncomfortable intensity. "Your surface thoughts are complex. There are layers there that I cannot easily read." His blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "Most people's minds are like pools of water, clear and easily understood. Yours is more like an ocean with depths that extend far beyond what I can perceive." Leaned forward slightly. "What are you hiding?" For a moment, considered telling them everything. The weight of her deception was becoming harder to bear, especially as she grew closer to her roommates. But the mission came first, and the safety of Earth depended on her maintaining her cover. "Everyone has secrets," she said carefully. "I've had to be strong to survive on my world. Maybe that's what you're sensing." Studied her for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps. But if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who will not judge you for your past, I am here." That night, alone in her room, stared out at the stars and wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. Every day she spent at the academy, she learned more about galactic civilization, but she also became more entangled in its social fabric. She was supposed to be an observer, a spy gathering intelligence for Earth's eventual contact with galactic society. Instead, she was becoming part of the very community she was supposed to be studying from the outside. Her contemplation was interrupted by an urgent chiming from her communicator. "Emergency alert. All students to report to designated assembly areas immediately." Quickly dressed and joined the streams of students moving through the corridors. The atmosphere was tense, with whispered conversations in dozens of languages creating a susurrus of anxiety. When they reached the main auditorium, the Academy's director was waiting at the podium. Director was an impressive figure from a species that resembled crystalline spiders, their multifaceted body reflecting the auditorium's lights in prismatic patterns. They had led the Academy for over a century, and their reputation for wisdom was known throughout the galaxy. "Students," Director began, their voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's translation fields, "I must inform you of a developing situation that may affect our operations here at the Academy." A hush fell over the crowd. 3 hours ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected an unknown fleet approaching this system. The vessels do not match any known configurations in our databases, and they have not responded to our communication attempts. Felt her heart skip a beat. An unknown fleet, could it be? As a precautionary measure, we are implementing emergency protocols. All students will be confined to their dormitories until we can determine the nature and intentions of these visitors. Peacekeepers' units are en route to provide additional security. The director continued with specific instructions about emergency procedures, but barely heard them. Her mind was racing with possibilities. Earth had developed several experimental ship designs in recent years, vessels that would indeed be unknown to galactic databases. Had her superiors decided that subtlety was no longer necessary? As students filed out of the auditorium in orderly groups, found herself walking beside Unit 7. "Most fascinating," the cybernetic being murmured. "In all my research on galactic history, I can find no record of truly unknown ships appearing in civilized space. All species are before they achieve interstellar capability." "Maybe they're from beyond the galactic rim?" suggested. Hopping, her voice sounded appropriately curious rather than terrified. "Possible, but unlikely. The energy requirements for such a journey would be enormous, and there are very few habitable systems in the outer reaches." They reached their dormitory, where Whisper and were already waiting. The atmosphere in their common room was tense, with Whisper's internal patterns shifting rapidly through colors that had learned indicated extreme anxiety. "This is unprecedented," Whisper said, their melodious voice strained. "In all the histories of my people, there are no records of unknown fleets." "Perhaps they are refugees," suggested, though their tone indicated they didn't really believe it. "Survivors from some distant catastrophe seeking asylum." Excused herself and retreated to her room, claiming she needed to rest. In reality, she needed to think. If those ships were from Earth, her mission had just become infinitely more complicated. She was supposed to be a long-term observer, spending years learning about galactic society before returning home with intelligence. The arrival of Earth ships would blow her cover and potentially start the very war that her mission was designed to prevent. But there was another possibility that chilled her even more. What if the ships weren't from Earth? What if some other aggressive species had finally decided to challenge galactic civilization? In that case, her knowledge of military strategy and tactics might be the only thing standing between the Academy and disaster. Hours passed with no further updates. The Academy's communication systems had gone silent except for basic emergency broadcasts, leaving students to speculate wildly about what was happening in the space around them. Lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling and running through contingency plans. If the ships were hostile and the Academy was attacked, her priority would be protecting her roommates and as many other students as possible. Her cover would be blown, but that would be irrelevant if everyone was dead. If the ships were from Earth, she would need to find a way to establish contact without revealing her presence to the Academy authorities. This would be extremely difficult, as all communications were undoubtedly being monitored. If the ships were refugees or peaceful explorers, she could continue her mission as planned, though the incident would likely result in increased security measures that would make her work more difficult. None of the options were good. A soft chime from her door interrupted her brooding. She opened it to find standing in the corridor, their dark eyes reflecting the emergency lighting. "May I come in?" they asked. Hesitated, then stepped aside. Entered and sat on the small chair beside her desk, their presence oddly calming despite her anxiety. "You are afraid," observed, "but not in the way the others are afraid." "What do you mean?" "Whisper fears the unknown, Unit 7 fears the implications for galactic stability, but your fear is personal, as if these ships represent a specific threat to you individually." His mouth went dry. Psionic abilities were more sophisticated than she had realized. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but even she could hear how unconvincing it sounded. Leaned forward, their black eyes seeming to look directly into her soul. "I believe you are in terrible danger, and I believe that whatever threatens you also threatens all of us." Before could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Not the calm, emergency tones they had heard earlier, but the harsh, urgent wail that indicated immediate danger. Through her room's small porthole, could see flashes of light in the distance. Energy weapons fire, her military training told her. The unknown fleet wasn't here to talk. The Academy shuddered around them as something massive struck the outer defensive shields. Felt the familiar adrenaline surge that came with combat situations, her enhanced reflexes automatically tactical information. The attack pattern was too coordinated to be pirates, too aggressive to be a misunderstanding. "Stay here," she told, moving toward the door. "Where are you going?" called after her, but was already running down the corridor toward the observation deck. She needed to see what they were facing. The main corridor was chaos. Students from dozens of species milled about in various states of panic, their translators creating a cacophony of frightened voices. Academy security personnel moved through the crowds, trying to maintain order while clearly being overwhelmed by the situation. Reached the observation deck just as another energy blast illuminated the space around the academy. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see the attacking fleet clearly for the first time, and her blood turned to ice. The ships were sleek, predatory things with angular hulls that seemed to absorb light. She had never seen their design before, but their tactics were unmistakable. They were using classic human military doctrine, coordinated strikes designed to overwhelm defensive systems through concentrated firepower. But these weren't human ships. The configuration was all wrong, and the energy signatures she could see didn't match any Earth technology. Someone else had independently developed the same aggressive strategies that had made humanity too dangerous for galactic contact. "Evacuation protocols are now in effect," came Director's voice over the communication system. "All students proceed to designated emergency shelters. This is not a drill." Watch the battle unfolding in space with professional interest. The Academy's defenses were impressive, but clearly designed to repel pirates or small raids, not a coordinated military assault. The attacking fleet had already disabled 2 of the station's shield generators and was systematically working through the defensive weapon emplacements. At this rate, the Academy would fall within hours. Whisper's voice called from behind her. Her roommates had followed her to the observation deck, along with several dozen other students who seemed paralyzed by the spectacle of warfare. "We need to get to the shelters," Unit 7 said, their optical sensors fixed on the display of destruction outside. "The shelters won't protect us if the station falls," replied without thinking, then caught herself. A mining colony student wouldn't have the tactical knowledge to make that assessment. But was studying her again, their dark eyes narrowing. "You speak as if you have military experience." Before could answer, the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red illumination, but the message was clear. The Academy's primary power grid had been compromised. "This is Director," came the announcement, though the Director's normally calm voice was strained. "Primary systems have been damaged. All students must proceed immediately to the evacuation bays. Transport ships are standing by." The crowd of students began moving toward the evacuation routes, but remained at the window, her mind racing. Something was wrong with this scenario beyond the obvious. The attacking fleet was powerful enough to destroy the Academy within minutes, but instead they were taking their time, systematically disabling systems rather than going for a quick kill. They wanted something specific. "We must go," Whisper urged, their patterns shifting to urgent yellows and oranges. "You go ahead," she said. "I need to check something." She pushed against the flow of evacuating students, heading toward the Academy's central computer core. If she was right about the attackers' intentions, that would be their real target. The corridors were nearly empty now, with most students and staff heading for the evacuation bays. Emergency bulkheads had sealed off damaged sections, and the air recycling systems were working overtime to clear the smoke that had begun filtering through the ventilation systems. Reached the core computational center, just as a team of Academy security guards was sealing the blast doors. "Student, you cannot be here," one of them said, his translator rendering his words in galactic standard. "This area is restricted during emergencies." "I'm a computer systems specialist," lied smoothly. "Director sent me to assist with data protection protocols." It was a gamble, but the guard was clearly overwhelmed and desperate for help. He hesitated for only a moment before stepping aside. The computational core was a marvel of technology, containing the collective knowledge of dozens of civilizations. Crystalline storage matrices hung in perfect geometric arrays, their surfaces pulsing with the flow of information. If someone wanted to steal the galaxy's accumulated wisdom, this would be the place to do it. And sure enough, she could see unauthorized access attempts flickering across the monitoring screens. The attackers weren't just trying to destroy the Academy, they were trying to download its entire database. "Fascinating, isn't it?" came a voice from behind her. Spun around to find standing in the doorway, but something was wrong with his appearance. His normal sneering expression had been replaced by something cold and calculating, and his posture was subtly different, more militaristic. "You're not," she said, her hand moving instinctively toward where she would normally carry a weapon. "Perceptive," he replied, his accent now completely different. "Though I am curious how a mining colony student would recognize the signs of identity replacement." His mind raced, had been replaced by someone else, probably using advanced biotechnology or psychic manipulation, which meant the attack on the academy wasn't external at all. It was an inside job. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Someone who appreciates military thinking," he said, stepping closer. "Someone who has been watching you since you arrived at the academy, wondering how a supposedly peaceful colony could so easily assess tactical situations and predict battlefield outcomes." He gestured toward the screens showing the battle outside. "This attack is proceeding exactly as you predicted it would. The Academy's defenses are failing in the precise order you identified during our strategic studies discussions." Felt her cover crumbling around her. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. Just as you know that those ships out there aren't using technology from the known galaxy. The energy patterns, the tactical coordination, the systematic approach to disabling infrastructure rather than destroying it outright. These are strategies from a species that the Galactic Council has declared too dangerous for contact." The pieces clicked together in his mind. "You're human." "As are you, though I doubt that's your real name any more than is mine." He smiled coldly. "The question is, which human faction do you represent?" His training took over, her enhanced reflexes automatically calculating attack and escape routes. But she was trapped in a room with only one exit, facing someone who clearly had the same combat enhancements she did. "There are factions?" she asked, buying time while she assessed her options. "Oh yes. Earth isn't as unified as our official government would have the galaxy believe. There are those who think humanity should prove itself worthy of galactic citizenship through peaceful demonstration. And there are those who believe the galaxy needs to be taught to respect human capabilities through more direct means." Another explosion rocked the academy, this one close enough to make the computational core's support systems flicker ominously. "Which side are you on?" asked. "The winning side," he replied. "In approximately 20 minutes, those ships will finish downloading the Academy's database and withdraw. The official investigation will conclude that unknown pirates attacked the galaxy's most prestigious educational institution and stole its accumulated knowledge. The Galactic Council will be forced to acknowledge that their peaceful civilization is more vulnerable than they believed. And then humanity will graciously offer to share our military expertise to help protect galactic civilization from such threats in the future. We'll be welcomed as saviors rather than conquered as aggressors." Stared at him in horror. "You're going to blame this attack on outsiders while actually perpetrating it yourselves." "False flag operations are a time-honored human tradition," he said with evident pride. "Though I must admit, having another human here complicates things somewhat. I can't simply let you evacuate with the other students, knowing what you now know." "So what's the plan? Kill me?" "Nothing so crude, though I am curious about your mission here. Peaceful observation, long-term intelligence gathering, or perhaps your advance reconnaissance for yet another human faction." Before could answer, alarms began sounding with a different pattern. Not the general emergency alerts they had been hearing, but the specific tone that indicated hull breach. "Ah," said her captor, consulting a device on his wrist. "Right on schedule. The main evacuation bay has just been sealed off by convenient structural damage. Most of the students and faculty are now trapped aboard the academy with no way to escape." "You're going to kill them?" breathed. "Of course not. That would defeat the purpose. They'll be rescued just in time by a heroic human fleet that happens to be passing through this sector. Earth's first contact with galactic civilization will be as their saviors, not their conquerors." His mind reeled at the implications. This wasn't just an attack on the Academy. It was a carefully orchestrated plan to manipulate humanity's entry into galactic society. The human government had apparently decided that if they couldn't earn acceptance through peaceful means, they would manufacture a crisis that required their intervention. "The students don't deserve this," she said. "They'll survive, most of them anyway, and their testimony about human heroism will be invaluable in the diplomatic negotiations that follow." What about the attacking fleet? How do you explain their disappearance when the human rescue ships arrive? Cloaking technology, another gift humanity will generously share with our new galactic allies. He checked his device again. Speaking of which, I need to wrap this up. The human fleet will be arriving in 15 minutes, and I need to be back in my identity when they do. He reached into his coat and a weapon that definitely wasn't standard Academy equipment. I'm sorry, you seem like a competent operative, and under other circumstances we might have worked well together, but you've seen too much. Wait, said, backing toward the computational arrays. Before you kill me, I need to know something. How long has this been planned? Years. The Academy was always going to be our entry point into galactic society. We've had operatives in place here for most of that time, carefully mapping the station's defenses and social structures. And Earth's government approved this. Earth's official government knows nothing about it. This operation is being run by people who understand that sometimes difficult choices must be made for the greater good of humanity. Felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Academy's damaged life support systems. A rogue faction of humanity had decided to take matters into their own hands, using tactics that would validate every negative assumption the galaxy had about human nature. You're proving them right, she said. Everything the Galactic Council believes about humanity being too aggressive, too violent, too dangerous, you're making it all true. We're being what we need to be to survive, he replied. The galaxy respects strength, not weakness. We tried the peaceful approach for decades, and where did it get us? Complete isolation and a reputation as barbaric savages. So you decided to become barbaric savages. We decided to be smart barbaric savages. He raised his weapon. Goodbye. Dove behind one of the crystalline storage matrices just as energy bolts began burning through the air where she had been standing. The computational core provided decent cover, but she was still trapped with no way out and no weapons. Unless... She reached up to one of the storage matrices and began carefully disconnecting its power coupling. If she could overload the system, the resulting feedback might disable her attacker's weapon long enough for her to escape. You're only delaying the inevitable, came his voice from across the room, and damaging the Academy's knowledge base in the process. How very human of you. More energy bolts sparked off the crystalline structures around her, sending fragments of shattered data storage cascading to the floor. Of accumulated wisdom was being destroyed in their firefight. Actually, said a new voice, this is quite enough. Looked up to see 7743 standing in the doorway, their dark eyes blazing with an inner light that hadn't been there before. Her attacker spun around, but before he could fire, he simply stopped. His weapon fell from nerveless fingers and his eyes rolled back in his head. Psionic overload, explained calmly as the false collapsed. I temporarily severed the connections between his consciousness and his motor functions. He'll recover in a few hours with nothing more than a severe headache. Emerged from behind the storage matrix, her hands shaking with adrenaline. How did you find me? I followed your thoughts. You were broadcasting quite strongly during your conversation. Stepped into the room, carefully avoiding the unconscious operative. Also, I've known you weren't who you claimed to be since your second day at the Academy. What? From 442B died in a mining accident 6 years ago along with her parents. I accessed the colonial records during my first week here out of curiosity about my new roommate. The expression was almost amused. Though I must admit, your identity construction was quite thorough otherwise. Sank against one of the computational arrays, suddenly exhausted. Why didn't you report me? Because your surface thoughts, while carefully guarded, radiated nothing but protective instincts and genuine care for others. Whatever your real purpose here, I could sense that you meant no harm to the Academy or its students. Unlike him, said, gesturing toward the unconscious operative. Yes, his mind was unpleasant to touch, filled with contempt for non-human life and satisfaction at the thought of causing suffering. Knelt beside the fallen man and placed their hands on his head. I'm going to extract some information from his memories. We need to know the full scope of their operation. Watched as eyes flared brighter, their consciousness diving deep into the mind of the enemy agent. After several minutes, they pulled back with a disturbed expression. This is worse than we thought, said. There are 12 human operatives scattered throughout the Academy, all in positions where they can guide the evacuation procedures. The plan is to ensure maximum casualties while maintaining plausible deniability. "We have to stop them," said. You still haven't told me who you really are or why you're here." Looked at her roommate, this being who had become one of her closest friends over the past months, and made a decision that would change everything. "My name is Commander Sarah, Earth Defense Force, Special Operations Division. I was sent here on a long-term reconnaissance mission to assess galactic civilization and determine whether humanity could safely make contact." Nodded slowly, and now I need to prevent a faction of my own species from destroying any chance of peaceful coexistence." She straightened, feeling the weight of command settling over her shoulders for the first time since arriving at the Academy. "Can you contact Academy security without going through normal channels?" "Yes, psionic communication is difficult to intercept or jam." "Good. Tell them there are human infiltrators among the student body and faculty. Give them this man's biometric profile and warn them to scan for similar energy signatures." "What about you?" Looked at the computational displays showing the ongoing battle outside. The human fleet would be arriving soon, and with Academy security compromised, there was no one in position to expose the false flag operation. "Except her. I'm going to the communication center. If I can broadcast the truth about this attack before the rescue fleet arrives, it might prevent a diplomatic disaster." "That will expose your own presence here," pointed out. "I know, but it's the right thing to do." Studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I'll help you. But first, we need to get to the evacuation bay and protect the trapped students. From what I extracted from his memories, the other operatives are planning to allow accidental decompression events that will kill approximately 15% of the evacuees." Felt rage surge through her again. They're going to murder students to make their rescue operation more convincing. Some humans, it seems, are indeed as ruthless as the galaxy believes. They left the computational core together, moving through corridors that were now filled with smoke and the smell of overloaded electronics. The Academy's superstructure groaned around them as the attacking fleet continued their systematic destruction of non-essential systems. The evacuation bay was a scene of controlled chaos. Over 3,000 students and faculty members were packed into a space designed to hold perhaps half that number. The air was thick and stale, and tempers were beginning to fray as different species' stress responses clashed with each other. Quickly identified the Academy personnel directing the evacuation procedures and felt her blood chill. Two of them moved with the subtle military bearing that marked them as infiltrators. They were positioning groups of students near airlocks and emergency bulkheads, places where structural damage could create cascading failures. "There," she whispered too, pointing out the false Academy officials. Nodded and began moving through the crowd, their psionic abilities allowing them to influence the minds of students and faculty members, subtly redirecting them away from the danger zones. Approached one of the infiltrators directly. "Excuse me," she said in her best worried student voice. "Are you sure it's safe to have people standing so close to the hull breach sensors?" The man turned to look at her, and she saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes. He knew she was human, though he couldn't immediately place her. "The sensors are perfectly safe," he said carefully. "Oh, good," replied, stepping closer. "I was worried because I noticed someone had tampered with the emergency bulkhead controls over there." She pointed toward a maintenance panel, and when he turned to look, she struck. Her enhanced reflexes allowed her to disable him before he could cry out, but the damage was already done. His partner across the bay had seen her attack and was already moving. Alarms began sounding again, but these were different from the battle alerts. Someone had triggered the emergency decompression sequence. "Everyone away from the outer bulkheads," shouted, abandoning all pretense of being a helpless student. "Move to the center of the bay now." Most of the evacuees didn't understand what was happening, but the urgency in her voice was unmistakable. They began moving away from the walls just as the first airlock began to cycle. The next few minutes were chaos. Emergency snapped into place as hull breaches opened in several locations, but the Academy's systems were still functional enough to prevent complete decompression. Instead of the massive casualties the infiltrators had planned, only a few people were injured by flying debris. "How did you know?" Director asked. their crystalline form clicking with agitation as they approached her. "Because I recognize the attack pattern," replied. "Director, there are human infiltrators throughout the Academy. The attack outside is a false flag operation designed to manipulate first contact protocols." Director's multifaceted eyes focused on her with uncomfortable intensity. "And you know this because..." "Because I'm human too, but I'm here to stop this, not help it." Before Director could respond, new alarms began sounding. But these were different again, the alert pattern that indicated incoming ships. "The rescue fleet," said grimly, "right on schedule." Through the transparent sections of the evacuation bay, they could see new ships dropping out of hyperspace. Sleek vessels with clean lines and familiar configurations. Earth ships, broadcasting emergency rescue frequencies and offering assistance to the unknown attacker's victims. "They're going to be heroes," said bitterly. "The galaxy's first exposure to humanity will be as brave rescuers risking their lives to save innocent students." "Unless," Director said slowly, "someone were to broadcast the truth about this operation before the rescue is completed." Looked at the Director with growing respect. "You'd risk exposing the Academy to diplomatic complications." "The Academy exists to promote understanding between species. If we allow deception to poison the foundations of human galactic relations, we will have failed in our fundamental mission." Director activated their personal communicator and began speaking in rapid harmonics to Academy security personnel throughout the station. Within minutes, the remaining human infiltrators were being rounded up, their carefully maintained identities stripped away by advanced scanning techniques. "Now," Director said, turning back to, "we need to decide how to handle the incoming rescue fleet. Do we expose them as complicit in the attack, or do we give humanity a chance to distance itself from this operation?" Considered the question carefully. The rescue fleet was probably crewed by personnel who genuinely believed they were responding to a legitimate emergency. The conspiracy was likely limited to a small group of extremists, not representative of humanity as a whole. "Let them rescue the students," she said finally, "but make it clear that we know the truth about the attack. Give Earth's government a chance to investigate and prosecute the responsible parties." "And what about you? Your presence here will need to be explained." "I'll tell the truth, that I came here to learn about galactic civilization and determine whether humanity was ready for contact. That my mission succeeded, but not in the way my superiors intended." Director's crystalline form chimed softly, a sound had learned indicated approval. "Very well, but you understand that this will change everything. There can be no going back to your secret observation mission." "I know, but some things are more important than following orders." The rescue operation proceeded smoothly, with human ships efficiently evacuating students and faculty from the damaged academy. To outside observers, it looked exactly like the heroic rescue the conspirators had planned. But key personnel throughout the galactic government were quietly briefed on the truth, and diplomatic channels began buzzing with carefully worded communications. 3 days later, found herself in a secure conference room aboard one of the rescue ships, facing a panel of Earth government officials who had traveled through several hyperspace jumps to reach the Academy's coordinates. "Commander," said Admiral, her former commanding officer, "your report makes for disturbing reading." "Yes, sir. The conspiracy appears to have been limited to approximately 50 operatives across multiple government departments, all coordinated by someone calling themselves the Prometheus Group." "And the galactic response to this incident?" "Mixed, sir. The Galactic Council is officially treating it as a terrorist attack by unknown forces, with humanity's rescue operation being genuine heroism. Unofficially, they know the truth and are waiting to see how Earth's government responds." Admiral leaned back in his chair, looking older than his years. "What's your recommendation, Commander?" Had spent the past 3 days thinking about that exact question. "Sir, I recommend that Earth immediately begin formal diplomatic contact with the Galactic Council, not through deception or manipulation, but through honest acknowledgement of what happened here. That will mean admitting that elements of our own government planned and executed an attack on innocent civilians." "Yes, sir, but it will also demonstrate that humanity is capable of self-reflection and justice. The galaxy doesn't expect perfection from new member species, but they do expect accountability." Another panel member, a woman didn't recognize, spoke up. "What about your own mission, Commander? You've spent months building relationships within galactic society. That intelligence could be invaluable." "Ma'am, my mission taught me that the galaxy isn't our enemy. They're people just like us, trying to build something better than what their ancestors had. The intelligence that matters most is that we can be part of that, but only if we choose to be partners rather than conquerors." Admiral studied her for a long moment. "You've changed, Commander." "Yes, sir. I think I've become what Earth needs me to be, rather than what it wanted me to be." The panel exchanged glances before Admiral spoke again. "Very well. We'll be recommending that the President begin formal contact protocols with the Galactic Council. As for you, Commander, you'll be returning to the Academy to complete your education." "Sir." "Consider it a new mission. Earth needs ambassadors who understand both human and galactic perspectives. You've proven you can think beyond simple military objectives." 6 months later, stood once again on the Academy's observation deck, watching ships from dozens of worlds arrive for the formal ceremony marking Earth's admission to the Galactic Council. The process had been faster than anyone expected, helped by humanity's willingness to prosecute the Prometheus Group conspirators and share advanced defensive technologies with other council members. "Nervous?" asked, joining her at the observation window. "Terrified," admitted. "Everything changes now. Earth will never be the same once full contact begins." "Change is inevitable," replied philosophically. "The question is whether we guide it or let it guide us." "Speaking of change, how are the new security protocols working out?" "Better than expected. Having students from different species working together on defense planning has created some fascinating hybrid strategies. Your idea of combining human tactical thinking with crystalline mathematical precision has been particularly effective." Smiled, the Academy had expanded its curriculum to include practical crisis management and defensive planning, acknowledging that even peaceful civilizations needed to be prepared for threats. Students who had once been kept ignorant of military realities were now learning how to protect themselves and others. "Any word on the long-term effects of the Prometheus Group's operation?" "Actually, yes. The Council's investigation revealed that several other species have extremist factions planning similar operations. Your exposure of the false flag attack has led to a galaxy-wide initiative to identify and prevent such manipulations." "So something good came out of it after all." "Something very good. The galaxy is stronger when its members join through honesty rather than deception." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching as the Earth diplomatic vessel moved into position for the formal docking ceremony. In a few hours, humanity would officially join the galactic community, taking its place among the stars not as conquerors or saviors, but as partners. It wasn't the future anyone had planned, but it was better than anything they had dared to hope for. I said quietly, "Yes. Thank you for choosing to protect us instead of just observing us. It makes all the difference." Looked out at the stars, at the ships representing dozens of worlds and hundreds of species, all working together to build something magnificent. She thought about her original mission, about the fears and suspicions that had driven humanity to send her here as a spy. Those fears hadn't been entirely wrong. The galaxy was indeed more powerful than Earth, more advanced, more unified. But what her superiors had failed to understand was that power shared was stronger than power hoarded, and that joining something greater than yourself didn't mean losing what made you unique. "Thank you too," she said for seeing who I could become instead of just who I was. As the first Earth ambassador stepped onto Academy Station, officially beginning humanity's journey into galactic civilization, realized that her real mission was just beginning. Not as a spy or a soldier, but as a bridge between worlds, helping both sides understand that their differences were strengths rather than weaknesses. The future stretched out before them, vast and full of possibilities she couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time since arriving at the Academy, she wasn't afraid of what it might bring. 2 years had passed since Earth's admission to the Galactic Council, and the Academy had become a very different place. Walked through corridors that now hummed with the diverse energy of true integration, where human students studied alongside beings from across the galaxy, their presence no longer a carefully guarded secret, but a celebrated addition to the Academy's community. Her own role had evolved as well. No longer merely a student, she now served as Director of Relations, a position created specifically to help navigate the complex cultural adjustments that came with humanity's integration into galactic society. It was challenging work, requiring her to balance her deep understanding of both human and alien perspectives, but it was also deeply rewarding. "Director," came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Unit 7 approaching, their optical sensors bright with what she had learned to recognize as excitement. "Just please," she said with a smile. "We've been roommates and friends long enough to skip the formalities." "Of course, I wanted to inform you that the preliminary results from the joint human-mechanist engineering project are quite promising. The fusion of organic intuition with quantum processing has yielded several breakthrough innovations." This was exactly the kind of collaboration that made current work so satisfying. In the 2 years since first contact, humanity's integration with galactic society had proceeded faster than anyone had anticipated. Rather than being treated as dangerous newcomers, humans had been welcomed as valuable contributors, their unique perspectives adding new dimensions to established fields of study. "What kind of breakthroughs?" asked as they walked together toward the research wing. "Primarily in adaptive defense systems. Human tactical thinking, when combined with mechanist computational power, has produced strategies that neither species could have developed independently. The Council is already implementing some of our designs in frontier systems where piracy remains a concern." They paused at an intersection where a group of first-year students was gathered around a holographic display. Recognized several species among them, including 2 humans who were deep in animated discussion with a young crystalline about quantum mechanics. The sight still filled her with wonder. Human children, learning alongside the galaxy's most brilliant minds, contributing their own insights to conversations that spanned of accumulated knowledge. "Director," one of the human students called out, noticing her approach, "could you settle a debate for us?" "I can try. What's the question?" "We're discussing the ethics of genetic modification for space adaptation," said the crystalline student, their faceted form shimmering with excited harmonics. "My human colleagues argue that artificial evolution is preferable to technological solutions, while I maintain that technological adaptation is more reversible and therefore safer." Considered the question carefully. These were exactly the kinds of discussions that would have been impossible before first contact, when humanity's violent reputation prevented such philosophical exchanges. "Both approaches have merit," she said finally, "but I think you're missing the most important factor. What do the individuals being adapted want? The ethics depend entirely on informed consent and personal choice." The crystalline's form chimed with what she recognized as approval. "Fascinating perspective. You prioritize individual agency over species-level optimization." "Humans generally do," one of the human students added. "We've learned that forcing changes on people, even beneficial ones, usually leads to resistance and conflict." "A hard-earned lesson," murmured, thinking of humanity's turbulent history and how it had shaped their approach to the galaxy. After the students dispersed, continued her walk toward her office, her mind turning to the day's primary challenge. The Galactic Council had scheduled a major review of Earth's integration progress, and she needed to prepare her report on the cultural exchange programs. Her office overlooked one of the Academy's main plazas, where students from dozens of worlds gathered to study, socialize, and share their diverse perspectives. The space had been redesigned since Earth's admission, with environmental zones that could accommodate the needs of different species while still promoting interaction between them. Kame's voice from her doorway. "Do you have a moment to discuss the psionic integration protocol?" "Of course, come in." Gestured to the chairs arranged around a low table that could adjust its height and configuration for different species' comfort. Entered and settled into their preferred position, their dark eyes reflecting the plaza's gentle lighting. "We've encountered an unexpected complication with the human students who volunteered for psionic sensitivity training." "What kind of complication?" "Their minds are resistant to the standard integration techniques. Not in a hostile way, but their thought patterns are structured differently than we anticipated." Leaned forward with interest. "How so?" "Human consciousness appears to maintain stronger barriers between different mental processes than most other species. This makes you more resistant to psionic influence, which is actually a defensive advantage. but it also makes voluntary psionic contact more difficult to establish. Is that necessarily a problem? Was quiet for a moment, their expression thoughtful. Initially, we thought it was. The councils were concerned that humans might be fundamentally incompatible with psionic species, but further study has revealed something remarkable. Which is, humans who do successfully establish psionic contact maintain their individual identity more strongly than any other known species. This creates a unique form of mental symbiosis, where both minds contribute equally rather than one being subsumed by the other. Felt a surge of pride at this discovery. So what seemed like a weakness is actually a strength. Exactly. We're developing new protocols specifically for human psionic interaction that could revolutionize how all species approach mental linking. Paused, their dark eyes studying face. In fact, we were hoping you might volunteer as a test subject. The request caught off guard. Me, I thought my background made me a poor candidate for psionic contact. On the contrary, your military training and mental conditioning might make you an ideal subject. You already have experience maintaining cognitive barriers under stress. Considered the proposal carefully. Psionic contact with other species was still experimental, and there were risks involved. But if successful, it could open new avenues for human galactic cooperation that went far beyond anything previously imagined. What would it involve? A gradual process of mental conditioning to prepare your consciousness for contact, followed by carefully monitored sessions with volunteer psionic partners. The goal would be to establish stable two-way communication while preserving both participants' individual identity. How long would the process take? Several months of preparation, then perhaps a year of experimental sessions. But if this works, it could change everything. Imagine being able to share thoughts and experiences directly with beings from across the galaxy while still remaining fundamentally yourself. The possibilities were staggering. Direct mental communication could eliminate many of the cultural misunderstandings that still plagued human-alien relations. It might even lead to new forms of collective problem-solving that combine the best aspects of different species' cognitive approaches. I'll do it, said. When can we start? Actually, we've already begun with some basic mental exercises designed to strengthen your natural barriers while making them more flexible. The techniques are similar to meditation practices you might recognize. Over the following weeks, found herself spending increasing amounts of time in the Academy's psionic research facilities. The initial training was indeed similar to meditation, but with subtle differences that required her to think about consciousness in entirely new ways. The key, explained Dr. the psionic researcher leading the project, is learning to open specific neural pathways while keeping others closed. Think of it as selective vulnerability. The concept was challenging for someone with military background, where vulnerability of any kind was generally considered dangerous. But she gradually began to understand that psionic contact wasn't about lowering defenses so much as choosing which defenses to lower and when. Your progress is remarkable, Doctor told her after a month of training. Most species require years to achieve the level of control you've demonstrated in weeks. Is that because of my human neurology or my specific background? Probably both. Humans seem naturally inclined toward compartmentalized thinking, and your military training has given you exceptional mental discipline. The first attempts at actual psionic contact were both thrilling and terrifying. Found herself sitting across from an especially designed chamber, their minds gradually reaching toward each other across the gulf of species difference. The initial contact was like touching fingertips across a vast distance. She could sense presence at the very edge of her consciousness, alien but not hostile, curious about the strange new mind they were encountering. Can you hear this? Kame's mental voice, clearer than any translation device but tinged with harmonics that were definitely not human. Yes, responded, marveling at the directness of the communication. This is incredible. You feel larger than I expected, observed. Most minds I contact seem focused and narrow. Yours feels vast and multifaceted. Is that good or bad? Neither, just different, and difference is what makes the universe interesting. They maintained contact for only a few minutes before Doctor ended the session, but felt exhilarated by the experience. For the first time, she had truly touched an alien mind, sharing thoughts and emotions in a way that transcended any language barrier. "How do you feel?" Doctor asked as they emerged from the contact chamber. "Like I understand something fundamental about communication that I never realized before," replied. "It's not just about sharing information, it's about sharing perspective itself." "Exactly, and that's just the beginning. As your skills develop, you'll be able to share memories, emotions, even sensory experiences with other minds." The possibilities seemed endless, but was also beginning to understand the profound responsibility that came with such capabilities. Psionic contact wasn't just a new communication tool. It was a form of intimacy that could fundamentally change how species related to each other. Several months into the program, was contacted by Director with an unusual request. "We've received a diplomatic communication from the hegemony of distant stars," Director explained during their meeting. "They're interested in establishing formal relations with the Galactic Council, but they're concerned about cultural contamination from aggressive newcomers." Recognized the euphemism. The hegemony was apparently worried about human influence on galactic civilization. "What kind of concerns?" she asked. "They believe that humanity's addition to the Council has made galactic society more militaristic and competitive. They point to the increased defense spending and the new strategic cooperation agreements as evidence of this contamination. And they want a demonstration that humans can participate in truly peaceful first contact without imposing their cultural values on others." "Understood immediately. They want me to be part of the contact team. More than that, they want the contact to be conducted entirely through psionic communication, with you serving as humanity's mental representative." The proposal was unprecedented. No first contact had ever been conducted primarily through psionic means, and the risks were enormous. If something went wrong, it could damage not only Earth's relationship with the hegemony, but also humanity's standing within the broader galactic community. "What does Doctor think about using the experimental protocols for something this important?" "She believes you're ready, though she emphasizes that this would be the most complex psionic contact attempted in recorded history. You'd be linking with minds that have never encountered human consciousness before." Spent the next few days considering the proposal, the rational part of her mind all the ways it could go wrong. Psionic contact was still experimental, her training was incomplete, and the stakes couldn't be higher. But the larger part of her, the part that had chosen to protect Academy students rather than follow orders, saw this as an opportunity to demonstrate that humans could indeed participate in galactic society as partners rather than dominators. "I'll do it," she told Director. "When do we leave?" The journey to the hegemony's border took several weeks, traveling through hyperspace corridors that were barely mapped in Council databases. The contact team was small but diverse, including representatives from several major Council species and an array of specialized equipment for facilitating psionic communication across vast distances. "Are you nervous?" asked as their ship approached the rendezvous coordinates. "Terrified," admitted, but also excited. This could open up entire new regions of space to peaceful contact. Or it could confirm the hegemony's worst fears about human aggression. "Thanks for the pep talk," said dryly, but she appreciated its honesty. The pressure was enormous, and failure would have consequences far beyond her personal career. The hegemony's ship was unlike anything in Council databases. It seemed to be grown rather than built, its organic curves and flowing lines suggesting a technology that worked with natural processes rather than imposing artificial structures on them. "Beautiful," breathed Doctor as they established position for the contact session. "Their ship's entire hull appears to be a massive psionic amplifier. They've found a way to merge technology with consciousness itself." The contact chamber had been specially configured for communication, with exotic matter fields that could facilitate psionic contact across the vacuum of space. Took her position at the center of the array, feeling the subtle harmonics of alien minds reaching toward her across the darkness. "Remember," Doctor said during the final preparations, "you're not